Okay, let's dive into this. If you've been following the news lately, you know the world feels incredibly fragile right now. But rather than just doom scrolling and worrying about the headlines, we're going to look directly at the data, the research, and the geopolitical science to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Today, our explainer is focused on a data-driven breakdown of a modern world war. We're going to easily but thoroughly detail the theoretical causes, the absolutely devastating global effects, and most importantly, how we can actually prevent this unimaginable scenario. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The sparks of global conflict. 2. The AI arms race. 3. Global economic collapse. 4. The threat of nuclear winter. And 5. Preventing the unimaginable.
All right, Section 1, the sparks of global conflict. Let's set the stage by impartially looking at the current, deeply interconnected geopolitical tensions that are heating up across the globe right now. You see, we aren't dealing with isolated issues here. It's really a compounding web of pressures creating incredibly fertile ground for armed clashes. You've got territorial disputes in highly volatile hotspots, think Eastern Europe and the South China Sea. Add to that the intense competition for natural resources like water and energy, which is of course being hugely magnified by climate change. Then, layer on economic injustice, which creates conditions totally ripe for radicalization, along with a global surge in nationalism tied to identity and sovereignty. And finally, all of this is happening amidst deep, complex friction between major powers like the US, China, and Russia. It's a total tinderbox. There's this incredibly poignant quote from the geopolitical research that says, tensions between major powers, such as the United States, China, and Russia, also add a layer of complexity, where any action and reaction from one country can trigger a response from another, creating a cycle of tension that is difficult to stop. This brilliantly illustrates the delicate chain reaction nature of modern global dynamics. It's a massive feedback loop. A spark in one region simply doesn't stay local anymore. It threatens to ignite a cycle of tension that is incredibly difficult to stop once it gains momentum. Section 2, the AI arms race. So the tinderbox is set. Now we really need to talk about the rapidly advancing technology that acts as the ultimate catalyst here, because it significantly lowers the barrier to actually initiating these conflicts. I'm talking about autonomous weapons systems, or AWS. Basically, these are military systems using machine learning to substitute human soldiers on the battlefield. This fundamentally changes the calculus of war by heavily reducing the upfront human cost. And look, this isn't science fiction anymore. Major global powers are aggressively developing these autonomous capabilities right now. For example, the US and its allies are developing the Blue Bear Ghost line of autonomous drones, while China is rapidly advancing the autonomous capabilities of its Wing-Long line of unmanned aerial vehicles, utilizing 5G, AI, and big data to completely remove the human operator.
Now, what's really interesting about this dynamic is the terrifying paradox at play. In the past, traditional armies faced a high human cost when invading or intervening, right? That meant a high likelihood of massive domestic political blowback, which thankfully kept the likelihood of initiating a war relatively low. But with AI-heavy armies, taking human soldiers off the battlefield drastically reduces casualties for the aggressor. That lack of body bags going home makes starting a war far more domestically palatable. So counterintuitively, keeping humans safer actually makes war much easier to start.
But here's the grim reality. An AI-driven war will absolutely not stay a clean, sterile affair between machines. If a highly advanced nation uses AWS to attack a less powerful nation, that defending nation literally can't fight back on the traditional battlefield. They'll inevitably be forced to turn to brutal, asymmetric retaliation. We're talking about a surge in terrorism, assassinations, and devastating attacks on civilians. This kind of violence will massively destabilize global security, extending the horrors of war far, far beyond any defined battlefield. Moving on to Section 3, Global Economic Collapse. If these conflicts spark, the effects are going to be felt globally, almost immediately, impacting billions of people regardless of where the physical bombs actually fall. Historically speaking, armed conflicts have spiked and strained the globe since 1946. But the economic research points out that a modern world war would entirely dwarf these historic peaks, bringing unprecedented economic paralysis. We live in a deeply interconnected global economy, and severing those ties, it would be catastrophic. We are looking at cascading economic failures on multiple fronts here. First off, nations will divert all their resources to massive defense spending, triggering hyperinflation and completely draining global development funds. Second, international trade will just grind to a halt. We'd see widespread supply chain severance, new trade barriers, and a severe era of economic nationalism and deglobalization. Third, targeting energy infrastructure means extreme immediate price shocks for oil, natural gas, and coal. And finally, cyber warfare won't just hit military targets, it's going to paralyze the critical financial and digital infrastructure that our everyday economies rely on. Put it all together, and this triggers a massive, instantaneous global recession. And right behind those stark economic metrics is a truly devastating human reality. 68.5 million. That is the record number of people who were displaced globally by violence and conflict in just a single recent year. Now imagine the economic collapse we just discussed, paired with a global armed conflict. A modern world war would exponentially multiply this humanitarian crisis, straining regional resources to the absolute breaking point and diverting vast amounts of international aid just to manage the basic survival of fleeing populations. Section 4. The threat of nuclear winter. Now we have to transition to the most existential threat detailed in the research, the long-term climatic catastrophe of a nuclear exchange. So the crucial point here is the number 150 million. That represents 150 million metric tons or 150 teragrams of black, sooty smoke. According to modern climate models, even with today's reduced nuclear arsenals, a conflict between the US and Russia could inject 150 million tons of this smoke straight into the upper atmosphere. It is absolutely crucial to understand impartially that modern military targeting plans don't just aim at isolated missile silos out in the middle of nowhere. They target cities, vast oil refineries, and huge industrial facilities. These targets would act as massive, inescapable fuel sources, igniting fires on a scale the world has literally never seen. Let's walk through the precise mechanics of how this builds into an extinction-level event. Step 1. Detonations ignite massive firestorms in those urban and industrial zones we just mentioned. Step 2, the intense solar heating of that black smoke actually lofts it deep into the upper stratosphere, way above where rain can wash it out. Step 3, prevailing winds spread this smoke globally, where it remains for years, physically blocking out the sun. Step 4, the surface of the Earth becomes cold, dark, and dry. Temperatures would plunge below freezing in the middle of summer. This completely halts global agriculture, leading to mass worldwide starvation. And here is the truly shocking part. It doesn't even require a massive US-Russia scale war to trigger this. Researchers found that if emerging nuclear powers, like India and Pakistan, used just 50 weapons each, which is less than a fraction of 1% of the global arsenal, it would cause global environmental change unprecedented in human history. We actually have a minor historical analog for this. A massive volcanic eruption caused the 1816 Year Without a Summer. It brought such shockingly cold, dark, and gloomy weather to the world that it literally inspired Mary Shelley to write the horror novel Frankenstein. A regional nuclear war would bring those exact conditions worldwide, permanently devastating global agricultural trading systems. Finally, Section 5, preventing the unimaginable. Okay, let's step back from the brink here. The research doesn't just outline the apocalypse, it also provides actionable, evidence-based policy solutions. To stabilize this geopolitical tinderbox, deliberate policy actions are absolutely required. First, we must mandate significant human presence on the battlefield, ensuring human-AI teaming rather than fully autonomous slaughter, which keeps the political cost of war high. Second, nations must embrace transparency in military AI development to reduce the risks of a runaway arms race and catastrophic miscalculations. Third, to mitigate those economic shockwaves, countries and businesses have to form strategic alliances and highly flexible supply chains. And finally, we need a massive surge in proactive, preventative diplomacy and comprehensive international cooperation, mirroring the enormous collaborative efforts that built international institutions right after the Second World War. I want to leave you with this provocative question drawn directly from our analysis today. Is global hegemony actually worth the cost of destroying the climate? And how do we manage to build international trust in an age where autonomous weapons make starting a war easier than ever? It's an incredibly delicate balance between our rapidly advancing technological power and our fundamental global survival. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll see you next time.